Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope everyone is doing well today. Shout out to all the subscribers as always, I really appreciate it, and shout out to anybody new locked in. Welcome along, gratitude to you. Let's talk about this fight. A lot of buzz going on now about this fight. Obviously Sebastian Fundora steps in to face Tszyu. This is a unification fight, right? This is for Tszyu's WBO belt and then the vacant WBC belt, which, you know, given all the moving parts in this card, which I'm still trying to get a hold of, and I'll do separate videos on those as well, is basically culminates to a unification fight tonight. Now, I said in my previous video, shout out to anybody that watched that, I was like, I don't think there's ever been a time where you get knocked out and then fight for a unification fight. I know it's not Fondora's fault, it just shows the chaos of boxing, really. But it does make for an interesting fight. You know, I was one to defend the Keith Thurman fight. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was intriguing. It gave a different element, dealing with the speed, the lateral movement, the intelligence, the experience. You know, all these things, which would have maybe prepared Tszyu for, you know, the likes of Bud and stuff like that. But Fundora steps in. What, 12 days notice? 6'6". I'll pull the tail of the tape up right now. 6'6" southpaw with an 80-inch reach. I mean, yeah, I know they found a couple of sparring partners, which is quite wild. But in all seriousness, they probably only had a handful of days sparring for Tszyu's camp. But look, Fundora, he will have, you know, not the same challenges, but he's now been, you know, have to deal with fighting Tszyu, and he was going to be fighting, I forgot that guy's name. It's like the one Brian Mendoza's fighting him now, right? I think he's from Uzbekistan. I'll pull his name up, but either way, it's an interesting spectacle, you know. And people are saying it's a way better fight, and I know where they're coming from. I really do, because stylistically it could be a great matchup. Just depends on how competitive it will be. Now, Tszyu, obviously, massively active, had a great year. I've done loads of videos about him because, I'll tell you why, because when he fought Tony Harrison, I picked Harrison to beat him. I hadn't really done my homework properly. I thought Harrison going in would have the tools, the footwork, the jab, and he sounded really good going in. I was following his you know, social media, and sometimes you can gauge, and even post-fight Harrison said that he was in really great shape. It was just, that's how good Tszyu was. And I was like, wow, okay, let me watch this guy. And I really did. And it was, I've said it, I've done so many videos about how subtle and how underrated every single department of his game is, pretty much. I mean, especially his defense. You know, he's a very good counterpuncher, which I think will be a massive part in this fight, because it's there's openings there, which we'll talk about from Fundora. But basically, Tszyu's coming in very active, very self-believing in himself, like, which is what I love. And if you're new to this channel, I'm very big on, you know, fighters get the best out of themselves, you know, putting everything on the line, wanting to be the best, you know, like showing heart. And he's back in the gym 2 days later. I'm pretty sure Fondora's similar. They're both good kids, you know what I mean? And Fundora, in an interview, really caught my attention. It was on the Boxing Voice, when, you know, something about, like, you know, he doesn't, you know, some fighters will listen to wait for the last bell, and, like, you know, they're counting down the bell, maybe in sparring, maybe in a fight, and he's like, no, we don't do that. And, you know, whether he does or not, I believe him, that it's just the little things that are mentally, you know, he's challenging himself. Little things like that just caught my attention. It might not sound much to you guys, but to me, I home in on stuff like that, because it's the little battles, mental battles, that can build up the discipline and build up the mentality. And look, he's a tough kid. We know that. I mean, you know, it'll be interesting to see how he's dealing with this mentally, because the last time he was in a ring, you know, in all honesty, he didn't know where he was after he got knocked out. It was a brutal knockout. That was a brutal shot to take. And, you know, kudos to him for coming back and fighting probably the baddest guy in the division, let's be honest. I mean, if you're going to be, I want to do a separate video on Jamal Charlo being the king of 154. If you're going to be the king, you know, at the end of the day, a lion doesn't just keep its pride just from going on walkabout, you know. Yeah, there's going to be other lions come in, and if you're silent and you're not willing to fight the other lions, then, you know, if Tszyu does win this fight, he's probably the king at 154. You have to say that, unless Jamal Charlo wants to fight him. That's another video, that's another story. But a king of the jungle doesn't just go missing and shut his, you know, I was going to say mouth, but, you know, from an animal analogy, like lions, they roar, you know, they're there. We don't know where Jamal Charlo is. That's my point. Anyway, I love a Animal Kingdom reference. You know, I'll talk about that at the end of the video, where I've got the lion and the giraffe, which is something one of my, I don't know if it's a subscriber, someone that left a comment, and you know, I like to make artistic videos, so I'll do that on Friday or Saturday. But let's talk about the fight, right? Because some things that stand out to me, I'm going to give pros and cons for both fighters, right? Because I keep it objective here, and, you know, I will lean towards someone more that I think will win, because that's just how I see it. And I do think Tszyu will win, and I do think he will stop Fundora. But, you know, him gauging the style and the size and just those fierce combination punches, not to mention those uppercuts that come whizzing through, which, in case you don't know, like, uppercuts are very hard to defend against. There's, you know, some controversy behind defending them. There's a lot of different ways you can do it that do work, but they're dangerous, right? And a lot of times the uppercuts, I'll show you some clips as I'm talking, when he caught Lubin. I know Lubin's a southpaw, but even Mendoza, you'll see, I'll show some clips where actually how he knocked Fundora out. He was actually catching an uppercut, like,
boom. Trying to throw the uppercut. Well, there you have it.
Last shots.
Timber as down.
That as he threw the hook. And when you're catching an uppercut like that, that's okay because he caught the shot. But you do leave yourself open for a left hook as well. So depending on how smart Fundora could be, disguising the shots and stuff like that will depend on how you block it. But what I'm going with this is, when you're like this, and Tszyu will probably have a high guard, and I'll be interested to see how good his defense is up against this, because he throws a lot of punches and they come from everywhere, and they come from miles away. You know, like, Fondora's reach is so crazy, and he'll just whiz in these leverage uppercuts, which are quite phenomenal, really. They really are. And a barrage of uppercuts when you can't see them, as I was saying, when you're like this, okay, and you got a high guard up, which Tszyu typically does against southpaws, you're probably going to need that. There's a large proportion of here, right? It makes sense down here where you might not be able to see the glove so much because you got your glove in your face like that. That's why a lot of fighters don't like to have their gloves up. They like to see everything. If they're moving their head and they're using their step back, then it's okay. But when you're like this, it is a little bit dangerous because you can't see the full side of where the uppercuts are coming from. And I'll show you a clip now. Fundora is very good at switching his shoulders and sneaking in the uppercuts on the other side. If the angle's not there, he can come around here and loop those in. That's going to be a real key punch for Fundora, those uppercuts, especially this left uppercut. And especially when they come in combinations, because they're vicious, man. And these guys aren't really accustomed to taking a backward step. So we're going to get fireworks straight away, I think. Now, some people are saying, well, Fundora needs to fight long, and I don't disagree with that. It's just, can he? He's never really done it. I know there were from ebbs and flows in the Lubin fight, but, you know, even Brian Mendoza after the fight was saying, you know, he's an average boxer, he does things averagely, and he makes a lot of mistakes. But in terms of him boxing long and keeping that jab on Tszyu, I don't see him doing that for long enough. One, his jab is good sometimes, and it's very inconsistent sometimes, and it's a lazy jab sometimes, and that's what got him knocked out. And I'll show you right now, okay? When you're throwing and he'll do it when he's got his jab pumping, and he really gets it keeps his opponent at the end of his jab, right? It's a southpaw jab, and he's really tall, so he just sticks it in there. He does pull with it sometimes as well, but gets away with it a little bit because of his height, but he's still trying to be defensively responsible. But he has lapses of concentration, and he drops his hands a lot, and this is when he gets tagged. I'll show you some clips right now. In the first 10 seconds of the Lubin fight, he got caught with 2 clean shots. Granted, they didn't do a great deal, but it's just the lapse of concentration and the discipline it takes to keep your hands up.
Pretty much with anyone that fights against Fundora. There's a right hand. He's got dynamite in both fists. And there's a right hand that stunned Fundora a bit. took it on the chin.
And maybe he's just so used to not getting tagged because he's so tall. I don't know, but there are mistakes there, big time. And, you know, oh man, I've lost my train of thought. What was I talking about? God, my memory's so shot to pieces sometimes. Basically, lapses of concentration. When his jab, right? Okay, so he's keeping his jab. And to keep it long like that and sturdy and hard and sharp, to keep someone at bay like that and then use a back uppercut, I mean, that's a different style of fighting. And to learn that would take probably over a year, I think, because his DNA it's not his DNA, you know? It's not his DNA. His DNA is to come forward and throw combinations and get into a fight and bully you. And guess what is in Tim Tszyu's DNA? To do that, but intelligently. And Abner Mara said in the Mendoza fight, Tim Tszyu doesn't really know how to jab. He doesn't really jab because he's waiting for you so he can counter you. I think, look, his jab is, he does hold it back a little bit, but that's deliberate, I think, because he's so calculated with his defense. And anytime you are jabbing, you're throwing punches, which means you're typically not defending unless you're using that as an offense, right? But he'll come and he'll walk you down, and then he'll wait for your shots, either roll it or counter it. It'll be interesting to see how he's able to counter Fundora because of the height and the range. I think it could be a bit messy the first couple of fights, to be honest. It'd be really intriguing, but Tim Tszyu, as I said before in another video, he bullied Jeff Horn. I know Jeff Horn was a welterweight, but he moved up in weight. But Jeff Horn is a physically strong guy, and he can fight on the inside. Well, he gets rough, right? And Tim Tszyu manhandled him. And he was like a rag doll. And I can see him doing that to Fundora, because Fundora on the inside, look, people say he's a good inside fighter. I don't disagree that his punches sometimes can look good on the inside. But if you watch, let me show you this clip right now, right? On the inside, really, Fundora makes a lot of mistakes, right? He's not very compact. He's very upright. His footwork kind of moves a lot. This clip where he got badly hurt against Fundora, which I think is one of the many things that might happen to Fundora, right? This is one. If you look at the play as I'm talking, right, his feet are kind of going back and forth from southpaw to orthodox. He's very upright. He's kind of like, he looks off balance, and he looks, you know, like he's a little unstable. And when you're fighting on the inside, you really want to be compact, and you want to have your base under you, right? Your balance and your feet. It's a scientific thing, because you can catch the shots and you can be more sturdy and shoot the shots on the inside. But when you're so tall and rangy like that, and you are getting pushed back, then, you know, it can be a bit of a problem. And I think Tim Tszyu's going to capitalize on that. And then right there in this little mini exchange, he's all over the place a little bit with his feet, drops his hands, gets clipped with I think it's a left hook or a right hook from Lubin, and that starts the beginning of the trouble. Credit to him, he got up and he took a knee and he took care of himself, and he's got a warrior spirit. I really appreciate that from him, I do. But it's those lapses of concentrations and dropping his hands. And in the Mendoza fight, once again, back to his jab, it was just a lazy jab. He poured it. Perhaps he thought he was out of range, but Mendoza timed it. And this isn't really Tim Tszyu's game, right? Where Mendoza feinted the left hook and then caught him bang on the chin with another left hook. But Tim Tszyu can counterpunch, and I'm expecting him to do, or possibly do, that in between that lazy jab. And if you look where his right hand is, or when he jabs, instead of bringing it back to your chin, this is the discipline, and this is the inconsistencies, and this the holes in his game that I think are going to really hurt him. Is when he jabs like that, he'll bring it back here, or do it like that, and it's okay, because of, like I said, usually his distance. But when he's coming on and he's pouring his jab like that, and he's bringing it back to his chest, well, it's not on his chin. And Brian Mendoza tested his chin hard. If you look at that left hook, right, it was just a quick like that, bam. Caught him bang on the chin. Look at his arms. He was knocked out before he, like, you know, that was an immediate involuntary drop of the arms. That's his senses got disconnected. You're telling me Tim Tszyu's not going to be able to do that? Now, in terms of Tim Tszyu coming through some roughness, that's a possibility too. I really do think so. One, he's been dropped a couple of times, right? Which, you know, they were flash knockdowns. I don't think he was particularly hurt. He was knocked down by a southpaw.
But I think, sure, that keeps it going. And he hits the canvas for the first time.
different style of southpaw. I don't think there's any same as Fundora, but you know, he's been dropped a couple times. His dad got dropped a bunch. Nikita's been dropped. It must be in the family. They don't have like amazing chins. They're not bad. Don't get me wrong. He's got an alright chin, but as they say, the best chin is the one that doesn't get hit. And Tszyu, his defense is superb, and it's tightened up since Goucher, which means the intelligence is there. So, but given that if Fundora lands one of those wild looping uppercuts that you can't really see from a way off, and Tszyu's in the fire and he's trying to fight this guy, because I can't see Tszyu doing the back foot thing, you know, because he's mentally tough and he's ready for that. He likes that. We could get a really good fight. We'll say it would make it really good if it's competitive, but I think it's a really interesting fight. And I think the one more thing for Fundora to watch out for is that overhand right. Now, Brian Mendoza was trying to land that several times, got very close with it. Sergio Garcia, I think it is, when they fought, he landed it a couple of times, and there's just, again,
he's a good inside fighter, yes. And there we see demonstrations of it with the right hook and a couple of those uppercuts.
Catapult right hand by Garcia under 2 minutes.
Lapses of concentration. Fondora's in the pocket. All he's thinking about is attack, right? And this is what the difference between, you know, a smart fighter and he's almost too brave for his own good sometimes, you know. But you know, Tszyu's brave and intelligent, and when you're bulldozing in like that, you can't keep dropping your hands because you're in the firing line, and you're going to pay for it. And he did pay for it again. And people will say Mendoza was getting his ass handed to him, blah blah blah. Yeah, he was, but if you look at in the corner in the 5th or 6th round, Ismael Salas, his trainer, Cuban legend, he's like, Brian, you okay? He's like, yeah, I'm good, bro. I'm good. His response was like, yeah, man, what are you talking about, bro? We're going to be fine. And a round or two later, you know, he saw the patterns, and I picked Fundora to beat Mendoza on points. I thought it would be similar to that. I thought it'd be a bit too much of a bully and just outwork him. And then, you know, sure enough, credit to Mendoza. I'm doing a separate video on Brian Mendoza in the next day or two. We'll talk about his up-and-coming fight, which is on this card. But I want to talk about his mentality and his persona, because he's great. He's great for the sport. He's a great dude. But he just needed that opportunity, you know. And he saw that lazy jab. Tszyu's going to be able to read the lazy jabs and the dropping of the hands, and he's going to be in there. Look, let's talk about the body work as well. Tszyu's a pretty damn good body puncher, and there's going to be a lot of room under there. I haven't seen anybody really hurt Fundora to the body, which is interesting. I'm not saying it hasn't happened. I just haven't seen it on enough film. If you know about that, let me know. But at the end of the day, there's some body stuff. There's a lot of target down there. If you can get to it, could be quite. I just realised it's been going on for 17 minutes. Quite a long video. I'll wrap it up. There's a lot of space under there, obviously, but to finish, I see it being quite entertaining early on. It could be a bit awkward, a bit messy while the styles try to gel. It's always going to be like that way when you have a 6'6" southpaw against, you know, more of a conventional fighter. But I think Tszyu won't take a backward step. I don't know what Fundora's game plan will be like, but eventually he can't help himself. The fight will end up on the inside, and that's where it'll get interesting. I think trades, exchanges will happen, and I think Tszyu might get dropped. He might. One of those uppercuts might get through. He might get hurt, maybe. But he's resilient and tough enough and smart enough to be able to deal and weather the storm, because you have to weather the storm against Fundora. There's no two ways about that. Anybody that's beat him or come close to beating him or lost to him has a major storm, and I expect there to be a bit of a storm for Tszyu, a little bit. But I do expect him to, you know, pass that storm. And when he gets and figures out a little bit the length and the reach, and he figures out what he needs to do, and he starts landing his shots, it could really get messy quite early for Fundora, because there's a lot of openings like I said. And when you go into fight mode, you make more mistakes. You make more of the tendencies that you normally do, which he hasn't. I mean, look, and let's not forget, he's just got knocked out. What's his mental state going to be like? What happens when he starts getting hit? Again, is he going to go back to that place? You know, I do feel for Fundora if he does take a knockout loss, which I expect the fight to be over in 6 rounds. I'll just put my prediction right now. I want to say between 4 and 6 rounds. Tszyu knockout, TKO knockout, maybe a corner stoppage, because at the end of the day, Fondora's dad's his trainer, and you know, only he knows how he's been dealing with this mentally, and only he's not going to want to see his son suffer if he does. I do think Tszyu won't have it completely easy in his own way and walk through him. Maybe he will. We'll find out, and that will be a statement. If he comes out and wipes out Fundora, that will be a statement. Not that it hasn't been done, just because a lot of people are, some people are picking Fundora, and some people are saying it's going to be a great fight, which it might, but we'll see. I'm excited. I can't wait for this one on Saturday. Let me know what you guys think. If I've missed anything, I try to do my best with all the footage and stuff like that, and I appreciate everybody that's tuned in. I really do. Thank you very much, and I'll be putting a lot of videos out this week on this fight and the whole card, and you know, I've got some other stuff as well from Subriel Matias, the scientific look at his punches, and I'm going to talk about pressure fighting as an art. And you know, just get the videos coming, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, it's got to come from here every time. Hit the like button. But that's it from me. Peace and love. Boxing on the Edge.